Alright, peace to you, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? Now, in today's video, I just want to reflect on yet another book I'm reading. After completing a few of the works of Rene Guénon, I'm on to Julius Evola. And Julius Evola, he's really talking about the same things that Rene Guénon is. He's making some reflections on the society. And one of the things that he says, which is characteristic of our time, and the polluted mentality we have. So remember in that previous video I made about Rene Guénon and how he essentially what he was describing was the overall tenor and philosophy of our time is the lack of appetite for anything spiritual, the lack of appetite for any higher principles, the lack of appetite for satisfying anything else other than our base pleasures and carnal instincts. Well, Julius Evola, he talks about the exact same thing in his work. What is it called? Which one am I reading? It's the something about men. What was it called? Men Among the Ruins. That's what it was called. And just another reflection, another point I would like to add on to that, which is what Evola talks about, really discussing the same things that Guénon was talking about, is even the idea of how we are to solve our problems. It's also based in, at least nowadays, it's based in materialistic paradigm. It's based in a naturalistic, which is not really natural, but this kind of mechanistic and vain assumptions. So really, the way most people nowadays view the world is they view it through a materialist lens. They think that our problems, the problems that both individuals and societies face, is essentially material, when in reality it's not essentially material. Our problems are essentially spiritual. Look at how these governments, and it can be of any kind, it's all the same expression of this materialistic vain philosophy. Look at how they try to solve our problems. It's always economic, it's purely financial. Oh, we have a great wealth disparity, and these things are problems, but the issue with their analysis is they see these problems as the root, when it's not the root. These problems are shoots which are coming out of a deeper and fundamental root, which is a spiritual rottenness. But as I was saying, they try to solve our problems by, if they're the communists, trying to redistribute wealth, or if they're the capitalists, trying to open up wealth and open up economic activity. Everything is based on the presupposition that material good, that man's problems are essentially based in the material plane, or at least a financial economic plane. We live in the era of economics. We have whole professors just who dedicate their entire lives, decades of their lives, trying to solve this deity of the economy and what it's forecasting and where it's going to go. And they think this is going to, we just need people to have enough goods for everybody else and a relatively fair distribution, then everyone will be happy. And that is essentially the presupposition of all of modern economics and politics. When you elect, really it's not an election, it's a selection. Doesn't mean anything, your vote doesn't count, but let's just assume that it does. When you vote for somebody going into office, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Justin Trudeau, whoever else, you're voting for a character who's going to conduct this materialistic policy in a slightly different way, but it's still a materialistic policy nonetheless. And these prophets, these oracles of the economy, these professors, we can see obviously their policies, their ideologies are what influence these politicians. Look at what these politicians are talking about. I've never heard, right now we're coming up to, Lord willing, the new Canadian election, or 2024, I don't know what year it is, 2023, 2024, but we're coming up to it, and Justin Trudeau is going to be facing up against Pierre Poilievre. By the way, I've actually talked to Pierre as well. I've warned him of these same things, but look at what these guys are talking about. They talk about housing prices, affordability, lowering interest rates, decreased cost of living. Again, it's all financial, it's all economic, and this has been influenced by these prophets and oracles of this deity of the economy. Again, the presupposition is that man's life is about the acquisition of goods. That's what it's all about. I never hear these politicians, whether it be Trudeau, whether it be Pierre Poilievre, who supposedly stands for conservatism. It's not true conservatism. It's more revolutionary materialistic ideology. It's just the older iteration of materialistic ideology. But I never hear them talking about, let's bring back the morality of the people. Let's bring back the concept of family. Let's bring back the concept of faith in God and fear of God. Let's bring back the concept of God's law and following it and the consequences that come from not following it. Let's bring back the education of why men should be men and women should be women and the fundamental difference between the two. These sort of transcendental principles, I never see this as a concern with any of these politicians. It's always economic policy. It's always this financial thing. And again, they're operating within the zeitgeist of the modern world. The reason why they've been able to get so far in their political career, guys like Justin Trudeau, Pierre Poilievre, Donald Trump, who else? Joe Biden, these types of guys. The reason they're able to get so far is because they're operating within that materialistic zeitgeist and framework which has been handed to them by the modern world. They have no room here. They have no room for somebody who's focused more so on transcendental principles and making that the foundation of society, higher order, divine things. No, these people, they're not even going to make it. They're not going to run for president. They will be stifled at every turn. We need, in order for people to even understand the political platform, it needs to be based in materialistic presuppositions. Otherwise, it's going to go right over the heads of people because they're so spiritually deadened, they don't understand anything beyond the material plane. That is the foundational fallacy of the modern world. We think that man's problems are essentially material, and we appeal to the most basest, coarsest, spiritually dead of instincts in order to guide our policy of how we conduct nations, how we conduct ourselves. It's all just about having more stuff, and if everybody can eventually have enough stuff and afford all their things, then we'll all be happy. But that's the foundational falsehood. Capitalism is based on materialism. It's based on this idea that our whole life, our whole existence is for the acquisition of capital in business and industry. Communism is based on that same presupposition that our whole life should revolve around the acquisition and fair distribution of capital, which is going to make things happy. One thing that Evola talks about in Men Among the Ruins is how this idea, which was foundational in the ancient world, this is a very modern contrivance. All these liberal movements, whether you're talking about classical liberalism like capitalism and free market economics, or whether you're talking about what has now been labeled liberalism, which is the communism, socialism aspect, he talks about this paradigm that we exist in. It's a modern contrivance. It's relatively new. The ancient societies, generally speaking, they didn't view things in that term. They didn't view man's problems as essentially economic disparity. And you notice even as well with how in the modern world we define ourselves, it's all based on economic values. Oh, the bourgeoisie, the proletariat, middle income people. We view things purely in the terms of economy and stuff, right? But in the past, it wasn't like that. There was a greater vocation which the society was constructed for, serving God, or if they were delusional polytheists, serving the gods, or whatever it was. There was a deeper foundational order and spiritual higher principle beyond just material acquisition, which guided the societies, which kept alive things like true priesthoods, true religious institutions, true righteousness. And the people didn't just live for work. Now it's all just about work. It's all about just this kind of system that we have. It's a natural outgrowth of the materialistic philosophy, which is spreading over the whole world. Nobody's escaped. My homeland, my homeland is Canada, but the land of my ancestors, Pakistan, hasn't escaped. Africa hasn't escaped. This tarantula of materialism and vanity, it seems to have bitten everybody with its poison. And some people it's bit long ago, like the English. Some people it's bit more recently, as in the case of the African nations and certain Asian nations. But either way, it's bit pretty much everyone, and it's only a matter of time until that poison proliferates and rots the society from inside out. And that is the poison of, again, that man's problems are essentially material, not spiritual. But as I was saying before, the ancient societies, whether you talk about the Roman, the Babylonian, the Egyptian. There was a greater, it wasn't just about stuff. There was a priesthood, even in medieval society. There was the church. Basic wealth and goods, they were applied towards things that weren't just solely quote unquote practical and pragmatic. There was more to it. The church, in the sense of materialistically speaking, it's not producing much. It doesn't have to. Or in our case, if we want to build a believing civilization, the mosque, the mosque or the church, the religious institution, its purpose is not to be this mass production factory and maximum efficiency. Its purpose is towards immaterial things, like the word I'm looking for is tempering the morality of the people, tempering the minds of the people, giving them, by the leave of God, guidance, giving them good sound philosophy, a uniting principle from the transcendental plane. That is the purpose for a religious institution. But now we don't need that anymore in the modernist world, which is all about pragmatism and production and materialism. We don't need that. That's why we see the decaying, the crumbling of the religious institutions. They don't do anything anymore. They're done. They're done. These churches, they're just houses of secularism. They don't really profoundly shape the society in any way. They've just been stomped on. And the reason is because the philosophy, the tenure, or I should say the tenor, the polarity of the modern world is materialism. And these old vestiges which still remain of the ancient world, of more higher transcendent principles, they're slowly withering away and rotting away. We have no need for them. Why have, at least in the modernist mindset, why have a mosque? Why have a church? Who cares about these things? These buildings, they're a waste of space. They're not producing anything. People are going there to waste their time when we could turn them into mass production facilities and factories and bump up our industry. That is how the modernist man thinks. And whether he realizes that or not, or takes it to its consistent conclusion, this is the direction, this is the trajectory of the philosophy which he upholds. So, again, all of these are false dialectics. They're false dichotomies and based in the presuppositions of atheism, nihilism, and materialism. Whether you want to talk about communism, whether you want to talk about socialism, whether you want to talk about capitalism, that man is essentially a being whose fate is determined by the acquisition or lack of goods. And this is a damnable philosophy which is going to very soon, if the Lord wills, destroy the world. It's going to turn us inside now. The very inventions which we have exalted at and spit in the face of God, metaphorically speaking, we have spit in the face of God. We've thought ourselves to be so smart because we have cars, we have Wi-Fi, we have Bluetooth, we have massive skyscrapers, wireless connection, air conditioning. These very things which we have exalted at and thought we're too smart for the idea of God, they're going to come back around and haunt us. Just wait for this World War III to kick off, Lord willing. And these very inventions which we have poured our mind and heart and soul into, in negation of everything else, in negation of all higher order principles and values, these inventions which we've just dedicated. It's like in a video game, right? When you're doing in a video game and you have like that character creation screen, you have a certain amount of credits. Let's say 100 credits. You add 25 credits towards defense, 50 credits towards attack, 10 credits towards stamina. Well, what we've done is we've essentially taken all of our credits and applied them towards the kind of the gauger or the criterion of materialism. And we've made a lot of stuff. And these are going to come around and bite us right in the rear end. Just wait, like I was saying, till this World War III thing kicks off. And all of those inventions which we have taken pride in, they come to destroy us and make life miserable. It's unspeakable to think of what these governments, the US government, the Chinese government, what these people have been hiding from the masses, the kind of technology they have. These people can do serious, horrendous damage. Weapons that are so dangerous that the people who are wielding them have to protect themselves from its terrible might. But I find it almost providential and ironic that the thing that we have divested all of our abilities into, material goods, those very things are going to come around and cause our dissolution from within. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's really all I got to say on the matter. I hope this talk was a blessing. And yeah, peace to you. Remember, deceit abounds, so keep your eyes wide open. Peace out.
Peace and blessings in the name of the Most High, viewer. My name is Walid Naeem, and I am a zealous submitter to the one true God, the creator of all mankind. Do you notice something wrong with the world? Something strange? Despite us having a church, synagogue, and mosque in every neighborhood, how has this entire Western civilization fallen into abject atheism, nihilism, and savagery? Why does life just seem so dull, so meaningless, and so devoid of anything real in the Occidental world? Despite the ubiquitous presence of these religious institutions, why are our so-called Muslim sons in large numbers drinking, smoking, partying, and chasing after women, with no seeming desire to do anything more with their life other than satisfy their base pleasures, when God has commanded them to be clean, righteous, and responsible leaders of their community? And why are our hijabi so-called Muslim daughters walking around with tight jeans that reveal their figure, with TikTok accounts posting semi-provocative, self-absorbed videos of themselves online for the world to see, when God has commanded them to lengthen their garments and be modest in their mannerisms? What has happened here? These young men and women are supposed to be making themselves right before God while raising the next generation of ardent defenders of the holy faith. But it seems that Islam features no more in their lives other than a scarf on their head, a Friday fidgeting around in the mosque when their parents forced them to go against their will, or a decorative hanger in their car. At this rate, if God allows us to continue going down the road it is, then Islam and the Quran will become pretty much non-existent in the lives of most of our descendants, if it wasn't already non-existent now. If we do not take a stand soon, in a few generations our children's children will likely be indistinguishable from the secular West. Is that the kind of world we want to live in? Our kids to live in? A world practically devoid of the remembrance of the one God and all things sane? I obviously can't speak for you, but for my own self, I can personally say, count me out of it. I'm not going to sit here and just watch my brothers and sisters, those who claim to believe in God alone, believe in Judgment Day, His prophets and angels, and all the other aspects of this holy creed, get duped into going to hell. I'm not going to let this happen without at least something of an effort on my end to reroute this dark trajectory. So, again, how in the world do we end up here? There is a mosque in practically every neighborhood in the West, and no shortage of donations that get dropped in their boxes. They have had lots of funding, lots of time, and unquestioning support from their respective congregations, yet somehow have been run over by the secular atheist. All of their so-called Muslim children go to the atheist, secular public schools for most of their week to be taught beliefs that are completely incompatible with the Quran. And we wonder why they have ended up the way they are. If these houses, and by these houses I mean the mosques, were truly of God, that were doing everything right, then why would our Lord let them get so decisively trampled upon by their enemies? Why do the wicked have all of the reins of power here? Clearly, something is not adding up. Well, it is my thesis here today that the vast, vast majority of mosques that exist in this world today have lost their way and follow a religion which is completely foreign to the Quran. This is why they have failed so miserably in the West, and it seems that God has forgotten them. In truth, the real reason behind their shortcoming is that they, and many of us, have forgotten God Himself, which is why He has left us here collecting our bitter receipts. So, what are my exact criticisms of the mosques today? As a Muslim and a man committed to the truth above all else, what are my personal gripes with their institution, which claims to be for God? The first glaring problem I can think of is that the majority of people who call themselves Muslim have allied themselves with a body of literature that is foreign to the Word of God, treating it equal to, and in fact above, the Quran itself. Of course, I am talking about the Hadith. Listen, the facts are this. There is no justification within the Quran which tells us to follow this hadith stuff, which came hundreds of years after the Prophet Muhammad died, and therefore he could have had no ability to oversee what people have said about him and determine if it is true or false. It is now becoming crystal clear, especially in the last 10 to 20 years, that many, many things that have been ascribed to him in their most quote-unquote authoritative texts, which they call their Sahih Hadiths, are forgeries that directly contradict God's final revelation. To take these words of men, i.e. the Hadith, and hold them to be equally authoritative to the words of God would be breaking the first and most important commandment, which is to worship God alone, making no equals with Him. To say that these supposed words of Muhammad, which are not even Muhammad's own words, but simply very doubtful rumors about what people who existed hundreds of years after him say he said, that have been decided upon by the scholars as authoritative holds equal, or in fact any weight in our faith comparable to the verbatim words of God himself, the Holy Quran, is idolatry. You are exalting man's words to the status of divinity, which should only be given to God's words. Nothing comes even close to the Quran, because God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, is its author. This includes the Hadith too, which pales in comparison and is superfluous to the glorious Quran. If you are interested in seeing a full refutation of the Hadith, you may watch my video titled A Defense of Prophet Muhammad, David Wood and Hadith Exposed, which is linked below. In it, along with refuting and putting in his place the worst opponent of Islam on the internet, Mr. David Wood, I also expose how the Hadith is completely contradictory to the Quran and the source of much of the Muslim world's problems. It is a 2-hour-long documentary where I seek to demonstrate the true character of Muhammad in the Quran, defending his history and personality with primary source quotations. I clear the last prophet of God's name from the people who have tarnished his reputation the most, which are certain types of Christians, and, sad to say, Hadith-following Muslims, which have said many terrible things about him. No, Muhammad was not a money-hungry, tyrannical warlord who married a 6-year-old girl. He was a shy, humble, meek man who married adult women, had compassion for even his worst enemies, and oftentimes had a tough time even standing up for himself out of fear of hurting other people's feelings. This is all demonstrated in detail in my video. Once again, the link for that will be in the description under the tab, The True Character of Muhammad in the Quran. So that is the first problem with the mosques, the reason for which I feel they have been forsaken by God, their adoption of an apostate literature which contradicts their foundational scripture. The second point of contention I have with many of the mosques is their seeming unwillingness to say anything controversial which may make them face persecution from their government. The fact that 9/11 was not only an inside job, but the fact that no planes hit the Twin Towers on that day, and the whole charade was a hoax designed by the governments of the world to forever frame the Muslim people as terrorists and justify invasions in our countries, should be taught to every man, woman, and child. This great fraud of the September attacks has left such a lasting, enduring reputation on every brown person, and Muslim in general, that it should be discussed in every mosque. Our people are not responsible for that crime, but it was the governments of the world who carried out that plot and framed us for it. 9/11 is just only one small example, though. There are many, many other quote-unquote conspiracy theories, which are really just conspiracy facts, avoided by the mosques due to their controversy, like the fact that the monetary system in the West is an ungodly scam based on usury, the fact that the so-called healthcare system is a predatory empire which doesn't try to cure anybody, but instead makes money off of human suffering, the fact that sodomite propaganda is being promoted to the masses, including our children, and the fact that the thing which I will call the C-19er, to avoid censorship, was a hoax perpetrated by the powers that be to greatly expand their police state, censorship incentives, and surveillance systems worldwide in order to create their new world order, and much more. These governments that have occupied our lands are de facto terrorist regimes, and the mosques seem to say nothing of it. They appear to be more concerned with not being labeled extremists while they live their comfortable, well-funded lives, avoiding topics that are hard to deal with due to the abject persecution they bring. That is my second problem with them. Their, at the very least, lack of awareness, or if not, perhaps lack of willingness to address the real geopolitical situation going on in the world. And lastly, my third trouble with the mainstream mosques, which can also be put into the category of conspiracy facts, is their complete ignorance on the true nature of the earth. It may sound as a shock to you, my viewer, that the Quran, the Bible, and in fact all of the ancient scriptures teach the earth is flat and stationary. This is the only model of the world which is compatible with those texts and also scientifically provable. This flat earth conspiracy, which should really be called the globe earth conspiracy, is one of the biggest lies of the modern world, we are told, and goes in line with what I said earlier about the endemic corruption of the governments of the world. Everything you have been told about where you live is a fabrication, and the space agencies are a shameless hoax. For a fully detailed presentation on the subject of flat earth, where I demonstrate the science, the history, the philosophy, the verses in the Bible and Quran proving it, and much more, you can read my book titled The Flat Earth Manifesto, which is linked in the description. This work runs to nearly 1,200 pages and is practically a textbook on not only the topic of flat Earth, but the subject of physics proper. And I expose the biggest fraudulent religion of the West, which is science worship, otherwise known as scientism. As with all of my work, it too is available for free. No, you do not live on a pathetic speck of dust spinning around in the middle of nowhere in space. You live in a brilliant, intelligently designed terrarium created by God and are at the center of the universe. Again, to learn more, the link to the Flat Earth Manifesto will be in the description. Those right there are my 3 biggest scores against the mosques of today. There are more points I could bring up, but these are the major ones. These are the controversies which have estranged me from the rest of the so-called Muslim world. Believe me when I say that I would love to join them, and that it hurts me so deeply that I have to pit myself up against the very institution I was born and raised in, the mosques I attended from childhood, whose carpets upon which I walked, stood, prayed, and listened to the preaching in my earliest years. But that is the price to pay for the truth. My commitment to God and what is right is more important than my emotional attachments to a place that was once dear to my heart. Simply put, this is why I think God has forsaken us. This is why I think that the mosques have been steamrolled by the secular atheist. It is because most of us have abandoned the word of God, neglected preaching the truth, and instead chosen comfort over courageous action. That is my thesis to why this great falling away in the West has taken place. If this sounds shocking to you, if it sounds so unbelievable that the majority of the so-called Muslim world could be deceived so badly, then I simply have these verses in the Quran to show you. In the name of God, the Almighty and the Merciful. Chapter 6, verse 116. And if thou obey most of those upon the earth, they will lead thee astray from the path of God. They follow only assumption, and they are only guessing. Chapter 25, verse 30. And the messenger will say, O my Lord, my people took this Quran as a thing abandoned. God has really predicted this a millennia ago. He knew that the people who follow what is really right are few and far between, that the majority of men and women are led astray, and the people who claim to love Muhammad the most, i.e. mainstream Muslims, would abandon the glorious Quran. God has revealed to us 1,000 years ago that this all would be the case. It is my mission, therefore, by the will of God, to band together with like-minded believers who have understood the truth and work together to build a new institution from the ground up, founded upon prudent fear. We need to start fresh, start anew. We need to build a new mosque where people can hear the unfiltered preaching from the Quran alone, where men and women can get married, where children can play and be educated in the truth, and where the name of the Most High God, without any associate partners, can be remembered. We need a group of highly dedicated men who will raise and defend this institution with their own hands if need be, and go out into the world warning people of the punishment of God, bearing witness to the truth of his oneness. That is my mission, my viewer. If you found that this mission of mine has touched your heart and is something you want to get involved with, then feel free to contact me in the email below. I am located in Ontario, Canada, and I'm looking forward to form a community with like-minded believers who want to contribute to this great cause. I am neither a nationalist nor racially biased. If you follow the Quran alone and believe in the truth, then as far as I'm concerned, you are my brother in the faith. I prefer you over someone of my own kindred who denies God and commits corruption in the earth. My loyalties are primarily ideological, not racial. Remember, my viewer, that this life is short. Everything we do and don't do is recorded by God and will either bear witness for us or against us on the day of judgment. Hell is eternal, and I do not know about you, but as for me, I want to meet my Creator in the best state possible. I want to spend my life struggling to build up my people, the true Muslims, so that God may be pleased with me on that day. If you are interested in that, then feel free to join me. If not, then find something else good to do which will prepare you for your appointment with the Most High. That is where we are all going anyway. With that being said, I say peace and God bless to all of you good people. Take care, everyone.